me how it all happens. Like, who invited you to have this conversation with the White House?
That is a great question, Katie. So I never expected it. And
Mhm.
the person who invited me was someone who was part of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce in Houston.
Okay.
And the only reason that he invited me, because we're not that close, right? We kind of
Mhm.
maybe met each other once, like when I was living in Houston. But the reason why is because, like you, he saw that I was really active speaking against Asian hate crimes and really like supporting Asian Americans. And specifically, like I really called to task the wellness community, which is like all my people, right? And I'm like, you
Mhm.
guys, you are literally making money as an acupuncturist, right? As a feng shui consultant, as
Mhm.
anyone who does any of these things that come yoga, right? Meditation,
Mhm.
mindfulness, it comes
Mhm.
from Asian traditions.
Mhm.
And there just was no click. Like people just didn't realize, oh yeah, the people who I learned this from, right? And I'm making money from, they're currently being attacked, even worse than normally speaking, right? And they just didn't know to speak out on it. And so I was like, just really trying to call accountability and just to get support from and raise awareness in this community.
Mhm.
And so Raymond saw that and he's like, Anna, I was invited to sit on this panel with like the White House Initiative for Asian American Pacific Islander Businesses, right? There's like a certain part, I think a group that really is like tapped into Asian commerce leaders and
Mhm.
then their constituents. And he's like,
Mhm.
I don't think this is for me. I think you should do it. Right. And it was just like the day before. And I was like, yeah, right on. And it was like perfect timing. That was
Yes.
already on fire. And I was like, I had that slot open. So it was perfect. And so I sat on and it was so humbling to hear because they had, like leaders from different Asian groups actually in different countries and embassies. And there was
Oh,
a
wow.
group that was I think they were like the Muslim group, and
Mhm.
they said that, and I forget everyone's name, but when the leader came on, he was like, hey guys, like I understand how you feel because in my community after 9/11 we were all attacked, right?
Mm.
Everyone in our community
Mhm.
was attacked, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh,
So
that
true.
is so true. Yeah, it's so true. And
Mhm.
then I questioned myself, did I stand up for them, right?
Mhm.
Did I stand up for these other Asians during that time? And I'm sad to say, like, barely, right? I mean, I
Mm.
said that it was wrong, and I had friends that were going through it, but I didn't really take a stand. I don't think
Mhm.
it really was a thing back then, but I think now
Mhm.
it's so important to be more vocal and like, in the world about it, having conversations about it. So like I learned so much from the people who were there because they've lived this several, many instances before this.
That's so true. Yeah, I remember after September 11th when they were starting to actually even um, do kind of random searches with people of Middle Eastern descent and especially men. Right, I
Mm-hmm.
had a discussion with somebody that I knew who was half Lebanese, and it was really interesting because he actually was like, "Oh, that's not me. They would never pull me out." And I was like, but that is you. Like, just because
That's
you're
exactly
half.
you.
Right, exactly. That is exactly who you are. Like, you fit the exact description of like the age range and like your ethnicity, all of those things. And yet he was like, he really equated himself to more of the Caucasian side than to the, you know, Lebanese side, which that was very, very interesting to me too. I was like, huh, I don't really, I don't know. I don't understand that very much, and and it's actually something that I thought about. Not that we're having children, but when I was thinking about having children, I was always like, if I had children, what would my kids want to be sort of want to gravitate towards, right? Their Asian side or their more Caucasian side. Although my husband says he's half Asian, and he kind of is technically right because he's half Armenian. And which is really interesting because yesterday was the Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day, and
Wow.
then President Biden is the first U.S. president to actually announce or denounce that the genocide and actually call out Turkey for the genocide of
Wow.
Armenians, yeah, during that time period, the Ottoman Empire time period, where 1.5 million Armenians were killed. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And to me it was like, that was the interesting part about that, was I never knew about that history at all until I met my husband,
Yeah.
you know. And then when he told me about it, and then he has like great grandparents who were killed during that time. His grandmother and his great aunt had to escape Turkey by themselves as little young girls, and they went through Cuba to get back up to here to the U.S., and they eventually landed in Michigan.
Wow.
However, yeah, it's crazy, right? It's so crazy. And then for so long, like I mean, nobody talks about it, right? Like, unless you are Armenian, I don't think you really, most people don't even realize what that history was like. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and for our history too, like in the United States, we don't learn a lot of that, right?
Right.
And I had this really interesting conversation with my dad, of all people, because he's always like, Anna, you're part of like the America propaganda machine, and I was like, you're part of the Chinese propaganda machine. But then, when he starts saying some things to me from his perspective, it makes sense, right? So when I was actually talking to him about the people in Hong Kong and how these students are protesting, and it's not right that China is like putting these people in jail for, really like protesting their democracy and their free rights. And he's like, Anna, no, Hong Kong belongs to China now. It is actually the law, right? It is what is actually happening. And we have every right to arrest these people. I mean, you guys Americans arrested, and he's American too. He's like, the American government arrested these Capitol rioters, right? Who were like, stormed the Capitol building because they were disrupting the law. In Hong Kong, people were trying to go to school and get to work, but these protesters were disturbing the peace. I was like, I never saw them like that. I saw me as a protester, but I didn't see it from the point of view of a government trying to keep peace, right? And these people disturbing the peace and breaking the law. It's just like, it's so many different perspectives.
Of course, absolutely. And even, I mean, this is another perspective, is like when I was in Hong Kong, I remember talking to the driver who picked me up at the airport. He was telling me about how much things had changed since China had taken over Hong Kong. And he said that most people in Hong Kong were not for the Chinese government. We're really against it, and we're very unhappy about it. And however, they're a country that hasn't been very political. So for them to actually even stand up, right, and then to protest, like, that has been such a huge deal for most of them. Because like when he was telling me about this, he said that normally when an election happens, there may be like 2% of the population will go vote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So for them, like, because of the protests, I was just like really astounded that, yeah, like they were trying to stand up for some of their own liberties and freedoms that they've always had, right? Like, they've always had a lot of these freedoms, and then it's been a lot of it has been curtailed because of China coming over and taking over too. And so I get it from that perspective as well. And then of course, being from Taiwan, like my family, like, I know Taiwan is really looking at Hong Kong and seeing what's happening there, and really looking at, okay, they don't want that to happen to them, even though they are Republic of China. However, they're also democratic in that sense, right? They have their own president, they have their own governments, all of those things. And so I think that it'll be really interesting to see what the next couple of years also brings there, to see if like they want to be more independent of China, or still be absorbed like Hong Kong has been.
Absorbed. Oh.
I know, I know. It sounds really terrible, but it's like I don't know what other word to use in that scenario, to be honest,
I
right?
know it's really a vastly changing world,
Yeah.
and I think it's just important to I think just be aware of it, right? Because things are
Yes.
changing so quickly, and then of course you have to take the economy into consideration. I was reading about like the microchip wars and how because there's a shortage now of like the material that makes the microchips,
Hmm.
China has kind of like this monopoly over it, which means that
Hmm.
they control a lot, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so there's it's so interesting the different levels of power, you
Hmm.
know? Um,
Yes.
yeah, politically, economically, socially. What
Yes.
does the US have to stand on? Like it's
Yes.
just, and especially when we talk about capital and social capital,
Hmm.
bringing back to the Asian conversation,
Hmm.
it was so interesting because it seemed like it was just like a blip and then it just like went away. And I have to say that I gave my Asian friends more, I wouldn't say like more pressure, but
Hmm.
what I realized was like no one was saying anything about it, right?
Hmm.
When there was like all of the for the whole year, right? More all of these hate crimes. I know people who their friend's family like was the elderly Korean woman who got acid thrown in her face, right? She was part of her
Hmm.
church, like it's just kind of crazy. And my
Hmm.
parents are like, Anna, like I heard they're throwing rocks at old Chinese people or old Asian people. On my cousin's street, there were two elderly people who were beat up, and it was in the
Hmm.
police report. She was like
Hmm.
sending me police reports. I was like, this is insane. And
Hmm.
so I think that it was so interesting to see that it really wasn't, no one was really talking about it, and Asians weren't really talking about it.
Hmm.
I asked them why.
Hmm.
Like they were like, I don't know what to say. I'm still processing it, right? Some people were actually just like traumatized, and they're like, I don't see why I have to be the one to educate people, right? Like I'm kind of the one who's the victim here, right? Why do I have to be the one standing up? And then I heard a lot of my Asian friends were saying that they weren't sure how to react. They weren't sure to be angry, or they felt kind of detached from it in a way, even though they knew
Hmm.
that they were also scared for their parents. And some of
Hmm.
them worked in Chinatowns, and they said that there was like a
Hmm.
lot of fear amongst the employees there.
Hmm.
But overall, it was just kind of like this pensive silence, which I think
Yeah.
is part of the reason why there's that bamboo ceiling, thing in the first place.
Right. Well, do you think that silence is, I mean, because I kind of see it as like part of our culture in a way too,
Hmm.
right? Because I mean, I'm sure you grew up in the same way where, especially as women, like we are really taught to be quieter, to, don't even laugh. My mom always told me not to laugh very loudly. I have a huge laugh and I love to laugh. And then she was always like, that's not ladylike. Like, you've got to, like, she literally was like, you have to laugh like this, like, like the stereotype of an Asian girl, right? And which always made me laugh even more so. However, I think part of that is so much of the way we grew up, though, don't you think? Like how we are raised, how it's, because if you look at even children, right, like Asian, like if you go to a restaurant, if there are kids running around the restaurant, most likely it's not an Asian kid.
Oh yeah, we talk about this all the time. Like Asian kids, what is in their genetics that they're just like, I don't know, they just stay put. They have the fear of the parents them.
Yeah, yeah. It's like something with our parents, like put like the fear of God in you, and you're just like really good and quiet, and you're sitting at your, at the table and just eating and not talking, like unless you're being spoken to, you don't say much, right? And so I think that's also part of it, too.
Oh yeah, and I had a conversation with my friend who's in her corporate life, and
Mm-hmm.
she said that no one acknowledged it in her company, which had a lot of Asians, right, in the company, until
Mm-hmm.
finally another woman of color, not even Asian, actually said something. Like she replied all, I think, in a company email, and she said something, and then my friend was like, wow, that was so great of you. Thank you. I just couldn't find the words, or I couldn't find something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I do think it's fair. Like if you're kind of the one being targeted, it's difficult that you also then have to be a leader, right? Not
Right.
everyone is like that, right? Not everyone just like is outspoken like that. But I
Yes.
think that there are moments when there's something that you want to fight for, right? And I
Yes.
just see that silence. I see that all in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
And, like Asians like work really hard and, like generally speaking, and they're like, okay, I'm going to get a promotion if I work really hard and I'm really smart. And then it doesn't happen. And then they're just like quietly bitter about it, which if you hear the snoring, that's Charlie, the bulldog. It's not a giant frog.
It's not a giant frog.
Someone asked me, do I have frogs in my office? Yeah. But that's like part of the, it's just part of the culture, but it's also part of how we kind of clash with a lot of Western ideals, right? A lot of
Yes.
Western way of doing things. When it's like, no, you do have to stand up. You do have to kind of make some noise to get what it is that you want, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree. And I think that, I mean, we're all learning and growing, and I think that just during this incident, I'm, at first my instinct was also like, well, who am I really to stand up and say something, right? Like it's first of all, it didn't directly happen to me, although of course I've had incidents of racism come up for me. However, it wasn't me or my grandmother or my mother, right, that had these incidents happen to them. However, I slowly started to understand that it's like, if it's not me and me telling my stories, then who is it? One. And then two, I'm affecting the people that I know. Right.
Yes.
And this was like such a powerful thing for me to realize, was that, somebody that I went to high school with, somebody in Texas, she actually reached out to me and told me how much like what I've said has really affected her and her understanding of everything. And then
Wow.
she has like talked about it with her church, and then the church has been also doing their own work anyway with racism and past injustices. And so it has nothing to do with like what I said. However, they were starting to look, but then it helped her to frame some things in that conversation, right?
Yeah.
And then to bring it to them. And then she also asked me for resources, and I was like, well, of course I'm not the expert, I don't have any real resources. However, here are the things that I've seen other people posting. And then I also gave her the recent PBS documentary on Asian American history, which I found actually really, really great, really powerful, really well done.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually started to read and watch all of the things.
Wow.
That, yeah. And then that church is actually not only about doing the work now, but they're going back into history and doing reparations on all of their historical injustices that they've seen and
that just gave me chills. That's amazing. But you're absolutely right. It's for like the people in your world. And I was actually shocked how many people in my world, right, did not know, had no clue.
Yeah.
Right. And then when they shared something that I wrote, because I was like, hey, feel free to share, their family, like their mom, one of my really good friends, her mom watches the news every day, had no idea. Right. And I was like, this is absolutely, and then my neighbors, if we meet outside or if we meet for coffee or something, I just bring it up. Hey, Anna, how are you doing? Well, I've been doing well. Just these Asian hate crimes are really getting on my nerves. Or I'll say, like, my cousin actually went to a rally. She spoke at it, which is so unlike her, right? And actually, my parents went and they were holding up these like signs. They had no idea what they said, right? It was like stop Asian racism and stuff. And like I was kind of scared for them for a little bit, so I was just sharing this with my neighbor, and she's like, "Why are you? What's going on?" And they're very like involved in the church, or like just, I mean, they're like really good people. And then I told her about the Atlanta shootings. But she's like, oh, but I thought they were, he has sex addiction and that's why he shot them up. And I was like, think about this for a second. think about this for a second. This has nothing to do with the fact that he had a sex addiction, had nothing to do, right, for this like Asian hate crime, because those people, those were actually healers. They were massage therapists, they were body workers, they were mom. I mean, like they were really good people, right? Or they were people doing a good job, right?
Yes.
And it had nothing
And
to
there
do.
were other people who got killed, like a woman who was on her honeymoon. She went
Oh,
and got a massage, right?
I know,
So
I
it's like
know.
it has nothing to do with sex.
Yes, but they were just consuming what what they talked about at, whatever on the
Mhm.
news or whatever. And then she's
Yeah.
like, Anna, exactly like your friend, I just never thought of it this way. Like I literally didn't know any of this was happening, but it's so helpful to have like a face to the
Mhm.
experience,
Yes.
because people just don't know because they're in their own world. So like that's
Yes.
why, like Katie, like what you've been doing, what you've been saying, it is so important, because people are like, I know Katie, I trust Katie. Oh my gosh, Katie has to
Mhm.
go. I never thought, how many people
Mhm.
have like, Anna, I never thought of you as Asian. It's like so weird.
Yeah. A few people say that, but I'm like I'm like, yes, I I look Asian.
Yeah, and there are experiences that we go through that you don't have to go through. Just
Mhm.
because we don't talk about it, right, doesn't mean that we don't
Right.
go through those experiences.
Right. Absolutely. So what did you think when the anti-Asian hate crime bill passed last week? Well, it passed in the Senate last week.
Oh yeah, I was like pretty amazed actually. I was like,
Mhm.
something is happening. But then again, I think the I think for me, just social awareness is the biggest form of capital. It's like the person who's, you know, at the barbecue and he hears someone say like a racist thing and it's a joke, and they're like, hey, that's not funny. Like, let's not do that, right? Or hey, like
Right.
one of my friends is Asian, or one of my friends is Black and they're scared for their lives right now, so that's not funny. For me, that's like real change. I think the bill is
Yes.
like freaking awesome. But what do you think about it?
That yes, and that's what I said. I said I had mixed feelings. Like on one hand, I was very happy and of course excited that they did pass this. Minus Josh Hawley, the one lone holdout. Who I don't know. It's like, yeah, what are you for hate? It's like, and his explanation of how it's the federal government, it's giving too much power to the federal government, like that doesn't really make too much sense to me. So besides that, and I did, of course, celebrate the fact that they did pass it. The other part of it is what you're saying, is that it create real change? No, because real change happens, yes, between all of us, every single person, and yes, like even in those small micro moments, right, where somebody makes a joke at the expense of somebody of color or of a different sexuality or anything, that somebody says like that's not very funny, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I even caught myself, like and I was talking this with my Asian friends, even when we make Asian jokes, right? Like maybe we need to watch that too. And it's like, I think it's just responsible. Some people, are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, I can't talk anymore. I have no free. No, it's actually maybe the way that you were speaking before was just flat out ignorant, right? And
Mm-hmm.
truly offensive. So
Mm-hmm.
like, I own that about me. And I
Mm-hmm.
am noticing, I guess, like less overtly prejudice or racist, dialogue, which I think is, that's a step in the right direction.
That's interesting. Because you live in Texas, it's like probably even more. I don't know. Because like sometimes I feel like in California, in many ways, I am a little bit in a bubble in a strange way. Right. Of course, I've also experienced racism here in LA, so it's not like that much of a bubble. However, most of the people I'm surrounded with are not openly
Yeah, there are
like
Trump signs
racist. Yeah.
everywhere here, Katie. Like if
Right.
we'll drive to the next town, there's
Mm-hmm.
just Trump signs. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in what world do you still have like a non-sitting president's presidential sign out in your backyard? Like for everyone to see in your front yard, backyard. It's kind of, people send a message through that, but I think that in my interactions with people, there is just like this. Uh, I don't know. I just see it more as like people are more on edge in some ways, right? Because of the COVID and all that stuff. But they're because of the greater dialogue around race, people are just more aware of it, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. And I would hope that like with the passing the like the legislation, I'm not sure if it actually addresses some of those things, because like what was important in terms of legislation is the way even like government officials like the president speaks about certain things, right? I mean, the fact that he called, like Trump called it a China virus, right? That was what was creating the hate crimes,
Oh
because
yeah.
it put into people's minds that it's like, oh, I see an Asian person, they must be from China and they must have carried the virus,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
They're the cause of everything. Yeah. And
Right.
it really, like I think a great thing that it did was I think it just kind of like galvanized Asians to a certain level of just really what I saw was like Asians choosing to be more proud
Mm.
and just like really choosing to be I don't know, openly Asian, if that if there's like a way to be that. And like
Mm.
I just saw Mortal Kombat. I just watched it the other day. Have you seen it?
I've never seen that.
Horrible movie, the worst movie ever. But it was like an all Asian cast. It was actually pretty. Like I was pretty impressed. I was like, wow, look at this. Like these are. This is like some. I don't know. It was just like when was the last time I saw a movie like made in the States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood, and it had like a mostly Asian cast playing actual Asian characters. I don't know. I thought it was freaking awesome. And you know what? My friends and I watched it knowing that it was
Mm-hmm.
going to be a horrible movie, but just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Asian cast, that's freaking awesome.
Well, that's why I watched Mulan.
That's right.
Yes, that's like exactly why I watched Mulan. And then, of course, like one that was done really well is Crazy Rich Asians. I do think, yeah, that was awesome, right? I will admit I did have some tears when like the movie started. It was,
Really?
yeah, it
Over
was
the
really
tears.
powerful, and I'm so glad that John Chu like chose to wait. Like he got a huge deal from Netflix, right, to actually put it on to streaming immediately. But he held out for like a big, a theatrical release. And I am so glad he did, because yes, there is a difference. There is a difference, I think, to see ourselves on a big screen and to have an entire cast be Asians, right? Like in a major motion picture from like from the U.S.
Oh my gosh. It really does it really makes, I think it just adds to visibility again,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And, I've never really noticed this growing up, but like during this whole time, I realized there's a lot of jealousy for Asian Americans.
Mhm.
There really is. It's like if you look at socioeconomically,
Mhm.
right? It's
Mhm.
just, I mean, if you look at the numbers, there's something there where like Asians are, yes, we do fall under that kind of like model minority myth thing, right? And there's like a
Mhm.
huge disparity within the Asian subset groups and stuff. But I actually thought it was so interesting to even notice this because I thought everyone was just like racist against us, right? But it was like there's like this different layer of I guess I don't know. Jealousy is the only thing that I can think of.
Mhm.
That's like, wow, you guys are doing so well, whatever that means,
Mhm.
And it's just like, I don't know. Have you experienced that at all, or like Asians must have it all figured out. You guys like do so well. You're all doctors, like whatever, right? And no one in my
Sure.
family's a doctor, but it's just like this
No one in my
high
family's
level.
a doctor either.
Yeah, I don't play the violin, right? But I'm like, yeah, there's Asians somewhere who play the violin.
I did play the violin for 2 years.
Nice. See.
But I didn't like it. Yeah, the thing is, yeah, around that, it's like, I, the model minority thing really bugs me, because it's like, it is putting like all of us into one big category,
Mm-hmm.
and then so those of us who are not doing well, right, then it feels even more shameful and more like hurtful in a way, that it's not
Yeah.
right? That it's like, okay, I haven't reached those levels of whatever it is that people are saying that I should be at, right?
Mhm.
And then, of course, it does create other discord between other minorities.
Yeah,
Too.
that's been the really interesting thing, right? Is like with the other minorities, right? There's always been this weird competition.
Mhm.
And I really think that, like everyone's kind of like, speaking about white supremacy and all of these things.
Mhm.
And I think this was a really good reflection point for us as Asians, right?
Mhm.
Like, especially like, if we're asking people for support, did we support these other groups, right? Were we
Right.
also part of, and I did see that, right? Like on a general level. And
Mhm.
I do see like kind of like a blowback from the other side, like, well, where were you? During these other movements and stuff. But I think actually, if you look at historically, there has been a good amount of just like um, support for other racial movements.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I mean, the more that we can all kind of get to, I mean, everybody, right? Like black, white, yellow, anybody really, brown, whatever. It doesn't matter. I think that if we all are taking the stance from the place of, okay, let's band together in the name of love, right? Let's really work on this all together. And then, of course, still do our own work, because I think like every single person has their own work to do around racism, because there's always biases, right? We all grew up and seen things, and we all have our own biases about stuff. And so to really uncover all of that and do our own work is really, really important. And then it's important that everybody gets together to really help each other out, because you can't do this by yourselves, right? There's no way that a whole, like, when the civil rights movement would have made any adjustments if it was only with black people, right?
Mhm.
It had to be with other people who were joining the cause. And I think
Mhm.
that's also why it was so powerful. Like, as much as it was very painful that George Floyd lost his life, but I think, like, I've been saying that, to me George Floyd is on the same level as a Martin Luther King.
Mm.
And it's because his life had meaning, in the sense that he lost his life so that we all could see something different.
Yeah. It was like that spark that, like you couldn't ignore.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And then people who had not seen it before is now seeing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't deny it. Even people who say like racism doesn't exist or whatever, like, like you can't deny it. So I think like
Right.
on some level, we're kind of all on the same page with acknowledging,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
like to me, that's like a gift. And actually, even something like the pandemic, we all are part of that experience.
Oh
We are
yeah.
way more united than we think, and how the media tries to separate us, or whoever tries to separate us, right?
Yes.
There's something really powerful in people standing together.
Yes.
And that's, to be honest, that's the only reason why I was able to be more vocal about this,
Mhm.
was because I actually could. I mean, this sounds so like silly, but I was like, don't you guys see what you're not facing right now? Because I'm not Asian, this doesn't matter to me, or it doesn't affect me,
Mhm.
whatever, or I can look the other way. This is your
Mhm.
blind spot, right? This is
Mhm.
something this is you not acknowledging reality in some way, and
Yeah.
it's showing up in your life. And I was actually never like in my life did the wellness culture that I was part of. All my friends are like, in wellness in some way, right? Like
Mhm.
coaches or healers
Mhm.
or wellness practitioners in some way. It turned my stomach for me to actually think back
Mhm.
on to all the conferences I've been to, all the people that I know. And, it wasn't really an inclusive, it's not really an inclusive culture. I
Oh
don't know
no.
why that is. Yeah, right. And it's just like,
Oh yeah.
I didn't realize it until this
Yeah.
point, when I'm
Yeah.
actually like going to people and say, "Hey, can you support me with this?" And they're like, "What? Everything is fine." Which is
Mhm.
like the ultimate
Mhm.
privilege. But it really opened
Yeah.
my eyes. Yeah.
It was so interesting, because that's what last year, after George Floyd, after protests, all of those things, that's when I started to go, oh, wait. Like, let me look at what so-called spiritual leaders are really doing in the space, right? And when I'm looking at it, it was like somewhat disappointing, I have to say, right?
Incredibly disappointing.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm being kind when I say somewhat, but yes, it was incredibly disappointing. I mean, let's just take the example. For me, it was Marie Forleo. Like, I did B school. I love B school. I think that I got so much out of it. And yet, like, the way she handled the members in the community was very disappointing to me, because it felt like it was like, one, she disappeared first, and then when she came into it, like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing things wrong, she was trying to apologize, and she brought in like somebody from the NAACP to speak to the community to almost educate us. It was like, well, what about you?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then she decided to just let go of her Facebook group completely, and not really be part of it anymore, because I think, she may have her own reasons for why, and she gave a bunch of different reasons. However, because it came from a lot of heat from the community for her to really step up and do better, it really felt like, oh, instead of stepping up and doing better, I'm just going to be out.
Yes. Yeah. That's a shadow. That's a shadow for a lot of people, right? And in this instance, we're talking about Marie, who is a white woman, right? It's this, and I heard it a lot from a lot of my non-Asian friends who are like, well, I don't want to say something and offend, anyone, or I just don't want to, I just want to keep quiet. I don't want to be part of this, basically. And even it was so interesting during Black Lives Matter when there was like that, that black screen everyone was sharing on Instagram, right? Like, but it basically was just a pass for people to be like, oh yeah, I posted up black. Yeah, I don't have to say anything about it. I'm good. And so it's kind of like, are you really, like you said, like, are you really doing the work? Are you sincere about this? And I think what really turned my stomach was when I realized all these little micro moments when I was going to these like really expensive retreats, right? And conferences and stuff. And I was like, wow, these people, these leaders, like, they just don't care, and in this current reality we're living in, you actually have to put yourself in the world and actually care, even if it's not affecting you every day. Like, if you're making money off people, right, and they're your students and they're your clients, like, it would behoove you to like really like care a little bit.
Yes.
And that was the part that I was like, I can't follow like half the people I follow anymore, because it's so clear.
Yeah. And that's when I was just like, okay, look, we all have to do better. I have to do better too, to find like the people I'm following, the people I'm working with, the people I'm giving my money to. Like, is there somebody else who's doing what I want, like creating what I want, right? And are there people of color doing it?
Yeah. My I will not name this person, but like, if you're literally making your living like as a yoga teacher, right, or as a feng shui instructor, or most of the Chinese medicine doctors I know are not Asian, right? And they're great doctors. I mean, they're great, right? There's nothing against them. And if you actually have changed your name to a Hindu name, and then you're not making that connection that, hey, maybe there's something about Asians being attacked in my own country. Maybe I should say something about this, because I'm making my entire living and my whole identity based on this. Oh, but I don't want to look at that because it's too negative.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to be attached to that negativity. Oh, I'm not in the mainstream news. That's so prevalent. And I just like, it's a little upsetting to me.
Yeah. And so, like, when you actually approached these businesses, right? Like, what was the reaction from?
Oh, it was so bad, Kate. Well, actually, no, I would say that for the most part, It was actually very positive. Most people
Okay.
were like, I honestly didn't know, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How do I speak about this?
Mm-hmm.
And they're my friends, and I was like, listen, you just speak from your heart. You can find a connection, right? So anyone, like, I would suggest anyone to find that connection. Maybe it's like you have an Asian family member, or Anna asked you to do this, or you practice an art form that comes from anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Find a personal connection and just raise awareness, right? I think that's
Yeah.
like the most important thing.
Yeah.
And you know what? People are going to criticize you, or the people are not going to criticize you. It doesn't matter. You're just doing the right thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are people who are like that and just like very earnest, and there are people and these are the people who literally write posts about, oh, I went to the gym today and I moved my chi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I sent them a message. It's like, hey, by the way, like, I just wanted, to share that this is what's going on, and it would mean a lot if you would show your support. And they would just say, oh, thank you. That's it. Like, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't, and that's fine, right? And then I also passively aggressively had my graphic designer make this really cool graphic that was like, it was a beautiful graphic. Hey, acknowledge your roots. If you practice an Asian lineage, or if you do EFT, which is based on acupuncture, Asians could use your support right now. And I just tagged everyone. I just like tagged them all on Facebook. And there were people who were like, clearly, like, I just really wanted to tag because I knew that we're gonna say, and of course, it's like harmless. You can untag yourself, but it felt so like good to do it.
So there was nobody who was just like mad or upset at you for calling them out?
Oh, I'm sure they were upset, but I didn't call out people individually.
Okay.
I wanted to. So, like,
Yeah.
someone actually asked me, and she's like a white practitioner. She's an energy healer, and she really was like, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." And she asked me, she's like, "Anna, how were you able to approach this so gracefully, and not from this like finger pointing place?" And I was like, "Well, let me tell you. First post that I did was the angriest post, calling out everyone, right? Like, what is wrong with you people, right? Just like, open your eyes." And then I took a breath, and then I just deleted it and I rewrote it to something that, like you said, came from a place of love.
Yeah.
And actually, like, as I was writing it, I was like moved to tears, because that's when I realized, like, I need people to see this. They need to see this because they don't know, right? I didn't know this until I started writing this post, So like, it's just a beautiful personal growth process, when you look at what's really going on in your world versus bypassing or ignoring it.
That's so awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's like stuff like you even just saying that, I was just thinking back on a conversation that my acupuncturist and I had. Like, she's Korean, and she is amazing. And she had said to me when we first started working together, she's like, most of the really well-known acupuncturists, Chinese medicine doctors are Caucasian. So and I always wondered kind of a little bit why she said that to me, really. Like, I didn't quite get it. But now in this moment, like, when we're talking about this, I'm like, oh, something is like there's a light that's coming on now that I'm like realizing. And it's really interesting because it's like, it's actually strange that like somebody would accept working with a Caucasian person in a very Asian modality, right, versus working with an Asian person, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody who's maybe perhaps has done it for forever too. Right.
Yeah, because my mom, one of her really good friends is an acupuncturist, and she's charging $20, $30, right, for a set, right? And then like you go to like someone who's not that, and they're charging like 150, 200, and it's like, yeah, I'm not here to judge anyone's pricing, right? But there is something about it's interesting and it's not accidental that hey, white people, when people say like cultural appropriation, there's something to that, right?
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you don't deserve your practice or your degree. I know you worked hard for it. I know you studied, like, but just so you know, like there's something that an Asian practitioner or another practitioner of an indigenous practitioner, I feel like there's some responsibility or just something to do with also like highlighting them, or
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of inequity in the wellness space, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what
Mm-hmm.
your friend was saying,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really blind to that for a while, but now
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh yeah, this is just like, why is it that like Chinese restaurants, right, like
Mm-hmm.
in Chinatown and Boston, they're like super cheap, and then you go to like the North End in Boston, which is like Little Italy, it's like 3 times. Why is that, right?
or
There,
or here in LA, it's like Mr. Chow's is like in Beverly Hills, and that's like Chinese food that is like really really expensive. But I think Mr. Chow's is. I think he is actually Asian though.
well, that's good.
Yeah. um, what do you think? Like, what do you think is missing? What do you well? Is there something that you learned, like either through the call at the White House, or all of those things? Like, what is it that like we as Asians can be doing better, and then at large, what society could be perhaps doing better?
I do think Asians in general need to lean more outward.
Mm.
We tend to lean inward, especially, and this is, it's just, I think a lot of people have this too. It's like, when something's going on, we don't want everyone to know about it. We actually feel bad, like I actually had some friends that are like, my friends are checking in on me because they're Asian. They're like, I don't need people to check in on me, like it's, I'm doing my own thing. And it's like, I think a lot of times Asians don't really want to be in some sort of spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's time that we kind of need to get over that, right? Because the
Mm-hmm.
deeper shadow, the deeper issue is we're not really asking for what we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not really valuing our own voice.
Mm-hmm.
And while it might be comfortable to just not have attention drawn on you, there's a balance, right? And if you lean lean inward too much, then the times when you do want to voice, something that's important to you, it's so much harder. So I think, it was great for me to see like folks like you and other people, and me, even me bugging people, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that was good because people just need to be shaken out of their shells a little bit sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the little bubble, like you said.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I remember you said to me when I first started speaking out, you were like cheering me on, and you were like, you should speak out more, and, and you should be in media doing this and all that kind of stuff. And while I appreciated, there was a part of me that was still like, ooh, why me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like one thing for me to be like on my own platforms, right? And then it's another thing for me to be like, oh, yes, I should also be speaking out in the greater sense. And there's a client I have, and she has been right. She's been on CNN. She's been on a bunch of things because things have happened to her personally, and so she's been able to share that. And then it's been really powerful to watch too. It's really really awesome for me to see somebody like her who isn't normally like the most outgoing person, but then to be able to draw in from her own power to actually speak up about what happened to her, and then also to really give a voice to some people who may not have the voice to say certain things as well. Like she was actually at the Asian American rallies recently, and then speaking out during those moments, like just in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, and then she's been on CNN a couple of times, been on other news platforms a couple of times, talking
That's
about this.
awesome. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think it's just so, there is nobody that goes around and says, okay, you go be our speaker now, right? It's like anyone who's noticed, someone needs to say something. No
Yeah.
one's saying, okay, I guess I'll say
Mm-hmm.
something. That's
Mm-hmm.
really it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Ooh,
really,
that's interesting. That reminds me of the Bible when God came to Moses and said, "You're going to lead. You're going to
that's right.
lead." And then he's like, "Me? I'm not. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not
Yeah, did
very
he have a stutter or
influential.
something?
I don't remember exactly what it was, but something about like him not speaking well, right? And he was like, choose somebody else, anybody else, God.
Moses might have been Asian. Yeah.
Right? Oh my goodness. So, yeah, you're right. It's like, and then it's just a good reminder, right, for all of us that it's like it doesn't matter what it is, but if you're using your own platforms, especially, it reaches just even the people that you know in your circles, right? It doesn't matter how big that circle is or those platforms, it can really have ripple effects. And, just like that church all of a sudden is like, a church in Texas is taking a look at what they can be doing better now, but then also taking a look at their past and really figuring out how to make reparations for all of the past mistakes and injustices they were making.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, accountability. That's so amazing. Oh my gosh. It's this journey has been just like, I mean, for me personally, and I can feel a difference in your energy too. When we, it's not comfortable, but when we just like stand up for what we believe in, and like you said, it can be like in a individual way, it can be to your small circle, it can be to your, social, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it's like, don't ignore the calling, because that is part of your personal power. That is part of your voice. That's part of your discovery. And that actually, I think that's the most important thing, is like another person who owns her voice and her value. Whoa. Right. I purposely show my face in places now. I mean, like, I know the mask and all that stuff, but it used to be before, like, I wanted to hide because like I was the only Asian person on a lot of stuff and people would just stare at me. Right. Or you get this uncomfortable feeling. And I'm so proud to show my face. I'm like, this taco stand currently has Asian representation. It's just like, because it's making a point. It's making a statement. Like, I am here. I am taking up space. I am proudly buying my taco. I'm proudly standing at this Walmart, whatever it is, right? I am seeing people with Trump hats and I'm just like, hi, like it's not anything like political statement. It's just like me being a person in the world and being proud of that. Like that's what this has done for me personally, right? And I realize I own my own safety. When my parents are at their political rallies or like that one that they went to, I was kind of scared for them. And I did, like, I had my friends like, hey, can you just say a prayer? You're just kind of like, and I was like, they're going to be okay. Because my mom called me and she's like, Anna, are we going to be okay going to this? Right. And then my confidence made her more confident. I was like, Mom, don't worry about it. Like nothing's going to happen to you. Like the chances of something like, and she's like, oh, okay, cool. And then they went off and they had fun and they didn't even know what signs they were holding. Like they just had a good time. So one person in their power and their confidence, like really affects so many people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.